Good morning. Once again, we are continuing our story of the Old Testament. We're looking at the ministry of the prophets, and at the moment we're looking at the last of the minor prophets that you will find in the Old Testament, the prophet Amos. We're looking at him and his criticism of the Jews for counting themselves as something special, something different. Day 222. We're looking at Amos chapter 9, verses 7 to 9. Yahweh says this: People of Israel, I want you to know that I think as much of the Ethiopians as I do of you. I was the one who brought the Philistines from Crete, and I brought the Syrians from Kir, just the same as I brought you out of Egypt. I, Yahweh God, am keeping my eye on this sinful kingdom, Israel, and I'll wipe it from the face of the earth. But I will not exterminate all Jacob's descendants. I will give the order and shake the people of Israel like corn in a sieve. Well, we travel a long way back in time to meet the prophet Amos. He was the first person whose words were recorded for posterity to be dignified with the name of prophet. He was working back at the time when the original kingdom, united under David, had recently split into two after the death of his son Solomon in the middle of the 8th century BC. He wasn't a priest or a politician, but a sheep farmer from down south in Judah. Despite his unassuming profession, he appears to have been an educated and insightful individual, and his message was a sincere criticism of the other larger kingdom in the north, which called itself Israel. After its exit from the rule of Judah and Jerusalem, Israel complacently found itself doing rather well economically. They also felt secure as far as international threats were concerned, and their religious piety remained a significant part of their culture, despite no longer wishing to use the Jerusalem temple and its priesthood. But Amos saw through their smug satisfaction. He knew that those who were enjoying their prosperity were doing so at the expense of the poor and needy, whom they were oppressing and treating unjustly. This led him to the conclusion that their faith was a sham. It was largely an outward show that lacked any substance or sincerity. He also concluded, well before it became apparent to anyone else, that their apparent security was an illusion. This kingdom thought it was special, but in today's passage we see Amos declaring that it was nothing special at all. So they had been set free from Egypt, and Moses had led them to the promised land. So what? He had also led the Ethiopians and the Palestinians and the Syrians. If you want to hear Amos criticizing their rich merchants, read chapter 8. His criticisms of their false piety are there for you to read in chapter 4. His message, like that of the young Isaiah, is simple enough. In chapter 5, verses 21 and the following verses, this is what he says. Yahweh says, "How I hate your religious festivals. I can't stand them. You bring me offerings of burnt meat and grain, but I don't want them. The animals you have fattened specially to bring to me are not acceptable. As for your noisy songs, I don't want to listen to them. Stop playing your harps, I'm not listening. Instead of all that, I want justice to flow like a stream. I want righteousness to flow like a river that never runs dry." Well, tomorrow we shall touch base with the prophet Micah as we prepare to leave the Old Testament. and its parting message about what God really requires of us. We shall see tomorrow.